Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 14.
I am in awe of my clients' ability to transform themselves because I don't do it. I don't do any of the work. I just have a process. I have a tool and a process, and it is unbelievable to see the transformations. If you would have told me that hypnosis was transformational 3 years ago, I would have just laughed at you and walked away. But I have a hard time describing it any other way.
I'm very excited to have back on the show Roberta Fernandez, who is an amazing hypnotist. And if you haven't heard about her, you got to go back and listen to the episode that we did where we talked about using hypnotic gastric band surgery to lose weight very successfully with her clients. And we talked a bit about using hypnosis to reduce pain, which is something that I really want to get into. So let's just get into it. Roberta, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Ashley.
You successfully had both your knees replaced without taking very much pain medication and recovered incredibly fast. And you surprised your doctors, all using self-hypnosis. Tell us about how that went for you.
Well, it was amazing. I think I had my surgery late in the day. And of course, by the time you get out of the anesthesia, they've already pumped pain meds into your body. I think I had maybe 6 before I said, you know what, I don't need this. And I went the next 6 weeks of my recovery all through rehab without taking any pain meds. So pain is an interesting thing, and I really would like to talk about that. There is no pain processing center in our brain. We don't have like our auditory or our visual cortex. We don't have a pain cortex. Pain is processed in many different places in your brain. And what we know is that it is largely based on what we're told it's going to feel like, either by our doctor or from other women in childbirth, for example. You'd mentioned that last session, or maybe previous experience. So when we have an injury, let's say, let me give you an example. Brain decides if and how we're going to process anything as pain. So if we're running across, let's say, a 6-lane highway, and we fall and we break our ankle, you would think we're going to have, oh gosh, I broke my ankle, it's painful. But if we look up and we see a big bus coming at us, chances are we're going to get up and as fast as we can finish running across that road and not even know we broke our ankle. Because at that moment, our brain assesses the danger and the bus overrides everything. Now, when we get over to the sidewalk and we sit down, and then we might start feeling something from our ankle. So when there's something wrong in our body sends a signal to our brain. It is not a signal of pain. It just says, hey, there's something wrong here. This is not normal. Our brain then determines how we choose to feel it based on what we've read, what we've heard, or maybe what we've experienced in the past. So we can change the perception of what we feel, and we can also control the volume. So for example, I had a woman that I just finished seeing. She'd had headaches for 5 years, every single day of her life. And about once a month, they would get totally debilitating. And I talked to her neurologist. She has stenosis and arthritis in her neck. And he said, it's never going to get better. It's only going to get worse. And there's no reason for her to feel the pain. It doesn't serve a purpose because they know what the problem is. And everything's been done that they can do, and there's nothing left. So I asked him if I could take her out of pain. I don't take every client out of pain without talking to their doctor first. That would be irresponsible. But he said, no, go for it. She doesn't need to feel this. 2 months later, she has not had a headache at all. And it's simple imagery that we used. Here's the key. The reason why she's able to do this is because she wants the change. She's allowed herself, she's learned self-hypnosis. Whenever she feels something coming on, or she just puts herself into trance for a couple minutes, that's all, gives herself that imagery. In fact, she says, I can just do it. I don't even have to go through the whole process because it's become second nature to her. It's a habit. And she has no more headaches. For 2 months now, she's not had a headache. That's how powerful it is. So we can turn down the volume and we can change the perception of whatever it is we're feeling.
Amazing. You just reminded me when I was in the fourth grade, I had a really, really old school gym teacher, and we were playing dodgeball, and I just tripped and ran weird and got caught up in my own feet. And I hurt my ankle. And my gym teacher came over to me and said, it's just a sprain. Walk it off. That's the only way to fix it. Walk it off. Walk back to class. And of course, he was such an authority in my mind. I believed everything he said. It stopped hurting, and I walked back to class. And I walked home from school. It took me about a half an hour to walk home from school. And that night, my ankle was so swollen that my dad took me to the hospital, and they got an x-ray and found out that it was broken.
Yep. Yeah, and that's how our mind works. And that's a lot of how hypnosis works. So I'm doing a training class in a couple of weeks for emergency medical personnel, like first responders and ER nurses. And I'm going to talk to them about the power of waking suggestions. When anyone is in fear or very emotional, or they're in an imaginative state, and someone of authority tells them something, it carries so much weight you can't imagine. So for example, if a doctor says to you, okay, you have to have this shot, it's going to hurt like hell for 2 minutes. Guess what? It's going to hurt like hell for 2 minutes. If the doctor says to you, just relax your arm and you'll hardly feel a thing, and engages you in talking about something else while he's doing it, you'll hardly feel a thing, because that is how suggestible we can be when we want to be. And that's a misconception I want to clear up for people. It's some of people's biggest fears around hypnosis. I used to work, my old office was at top of a bank building. And I told my new clients, if I were to tell you in trance that I was a little short of cash this month, and I'd like you to go down to the bank before you leave and rob them and drop a few bucks by my office, you would emerge from trance with a look on your face like, hey, what's this all about? And you would never take that suggestion in unless you were a natural born bank robber, and then you might think it's a pretty good idea. So the suggestions that we take in are those that we choose, ones that are in line with our morals and our ethics and our values. That is what we're going to do. If you look even at a stage show, because people think a stage hypnotist has power of those people, he doesn't have any power over them. We don't have that kind of control. It's an illusion. And at any given moment, there might be 3 or 4 people on that stage that are not participating because they're choosing not to participate. The people that say, oh yeah, he just did that to me and I did it. Oh, you know what? They had a part of themselves that knew it was about fun, and they have an excuse. Hey, the hypnotist made me do it. And, they go and be a little bit uninhibited for a night. So, but the reality of it is that there is no hypnotist that has control over you. You choose it. And it's that way, whether it's a fear that you want to get rid of, pain that you don't want to have, weight that you want to get rid of, smoking that you want to stop. If you want the change, it will work. If you don't want the change, hypnosis will not work for you.
Now, what about those who they want the change, but they've had so many failures in their past? Like maybe they've been smoking their whole life and they've tried to quit so many times, or maybe they've even attempted other mind tricks, or maybe someone who's been on 30 diets and they just say, well, I really want to, but I can't because I've had so many failures in my past. I probably can't. There's probably something in my mind that's not going to let me succeed. What would you say to those people?
Well, I would say, yes, you're absolutely right. If you say I can, you can. If you say I can't, you can't. If you say I am, whatever comes after that is very powerful. And most of those times, people have been telling themselves that for a very long time, and they've convinced themselves. Well, they can unconvince themselves. Now, sometimes there is an emotional component to all those things. Like, for example, smoking is about 70% habit, 30% emotional. Weight loss, exactly the opposite. It's about 70% emotional and 30% habitual. So a lot of times people come to me for weight, and they've been doing all the right things. They're changing their habits, but they haven't gotten to the emotion that's driving them to use food as a distractor to begin with. Same with smoking. Sometimes smokers will come to me and they'll say, oh, I've quit 3 times. Great. How long did it last? Oh, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months. And then they went back to it. Now that tells me that they can do it, that it's not all habitual. They're using smoking as a distractor for something emotional. And then that client has to be approached in a very different way with a very different process. So that's why a good hypnotist, and these are questions your listeners should ask about training, because there's a couple different camps of hypnotists out there. And they're both very good. I'm not saying there's one bad or the other. I have training in both of them, a lot of training in both of them, where we work on the emotional side and with regression work, and we also work on what we call direct suggestion, which is, what I would do with most smokers, but not all smokers, which is what I'm going to do with people with performance improvement. That's about 20% of the work that I do. It's what I use with pain clients. So, except that some chronic pain clients may have lots of emotional attachment to that pain. And if we don't break that emotional attachment, that pain serves a purpose for them. And that's what we have to change. So a skilled hypnotist is really going to listen to their clients, and they're going to do work that encompasses all of those things so that the client gets the benefit it really needs. Anybody that says, oh, I've done this so many times and it's not working for me anymore, well, they're not using the right tools. And that's why it's not working, if they really want the change. Now, sometimes clients think they want the change, but there's a big benefit to their pain. If I have time, can I give you a quick example of what that would be?
I would love that. I was just about to say that one of my favorite books is written by John E. Sarno called Healing Back Pain. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he discussed the mind-body connection, and his experience was seeing that people in chronic pain often they're holding on to the pain because of an underlying emotional reason. So yes, please give us an example.
Yeah, we call it, in my field, we call it secondary gain. So that is when the problem provides a better solution than the solution to the problem, a bigger benefit than the solution to the problem. So I had an elderly woman come to me who had started having a couple years ago severe asthma, and she had gone to the doctor. They'd done all the tests. There's nothing physically wrong with her. There's no allergies. There's no reason for the asthma to be there. And a very long story short, in hypnosis, we discovered that when she got an asthma attack that landed her in the hospital, because they would be very severe asthma attacks, everybody came. Her family all came. And she felt largely ignored. And this was her mind's way of producing a symptom in her body that got her the attention that she needed. And let me tell you, even after we found the cause, she was not willing to give it up. But the problem was it was causing her dire financial problems because she didn't have good insurance. And so with her permission, and we discussed this at length, I brought all the family together. I explained to them what was happening for her and told them all, look, she doesn't have to have these asthma attacks. She's doing it to get your attention. Now, you showing up once or twice isn't going to get rid of them. You got to prove to her that if you promise her you're going to call her once a week, you call her once a week. Or you come for dinner every other week or once a month, or whatever it is you can commit to, you got to commit. And, that was a big deal. And it took a while for her to gain their trust. But it's been 2 years and she's not had asthma attack anymore, because that was serving a purpose for her. Her mind had an emotion that her body created. And a lot of illnesses like that. And most doctors recognize that connection. It doesn't mean we're not sick. It just means that when we hold emotion inside of our bodies, it has to express itself sooner or later, either mentally or physically. And a lot of times when clients come in, their illness, and they see it very clearly, their illness is directly related to the problem that they're having. So it's just a fascinating thing. It's kind of our mind's way of saying, look, I'm going to be in your face. I'm going to make you sick until you deal with this. And that is the reason more often than not what drives people in here.
You're really sharing with us the power of our unconscious mind, our subconscious mind. In the last interview, you shared that it's, I don't know, something like 80% or 90% of our mind is all the unconscious. And we're only really living in this 10% of our mind. And there's something called, or a saying that's popular, is thoughts become things. So you're sharing.
Yes.
Yeah, you're sharing how our thoughts, our conscious decisions are becoming things, like a manifestation of disease. How else in your experience have you seen thoughts become things?
Oh, well, it happens physically. When clients come in, I show them a real easy test with a pendulum. I'll have them hold a pendulum over a circle with hashtags in it or crosses, lines on it. And I'll tell them, hold your hand still, and with your eyes and your thoughts only, allow the pendulum to swing. Imagine the pendulum swinging left to right or up and down or tracing the line of that circle. And everybody can do that. Because what happens, remember I said in the last podcast, your brain, we know this scientifically, your brain can't tell the difference between what you're thinking and what's real. And so when you have a thought, I'm thinking I'm moving that pendulum, your brain says, oh, she's moving the pendulum. Look, her eyes are tracing it. It's moving. It sends a signal from your brain down your hand, down your arm into your hand, to the very tiny, minute, smooth muscles in your finger. And that's what actually moves that pendulum. We can't perceive it because the movement is so minuscule, but that's what's moving the pendulum. Our brain thinks we're doing it, and it creates the physical response that goes with it. I'll lead a client through, just have them close their eyes and listen to this little story I'll tell them about being in their kitchen and eating a lemon. And many clients, most clients, when they bite that lemon through this little imagination game we play, they actually salivate. It causes a physical response. It's no different than what you spoke of earlier, watching that movie and experiencing fear. So all it is we have an emotion. The emotion happens in our subconscious mind, and physically we express something. So I'm afraid. We have this feeling, this emotion of fear, and it manifests in our body as a heart palpitation or maybe sweating. I'm sad is an emotion in our subconscious that might manifest in tears. So it's our body's physical expression of it. So if we know that to be true, why is it that when we ignore something long enough, our body won't find another way to express it in illness? It just makes sense.
Now, for those who are experiencing chronic pain, I mean, this is very real for them. Actually, a friend came over yesterday. We had my son's first birthday party and invited a bunch of friends over. And this one friend has arthritis in both her knees. And we were discussing different ways that she could overcome this pain. And she said, well, my friend told me to go to yoga class, and this yoga instructor said, your pain is all in your mind. You're choosing to be in pain. And she was so insulted by that. She said, this pain is so real to me. I wake up with it. I go to bed with it. All day long. That's all I can feel and think about. And so she was just so hurt or offended by this yoga instructor that was telling her that pain is all in her head. So for those people who are in pain right now, it's real. It's so real to them. What advice can you give them to help them reduce that pain?
Well, and I'm so sorry to hear that someone said that to her, but I do get that all the time. Pain is real. Don't get me wrong. You manifest pain. The thing that we don't understand is that the pain was there originally for a very good reason. But the body heals after a surgery, after an injury. Your body does heal. It takes a while, maybe 6 or 8 months, whatever, depending on what it is, but it does heal. After that, the pain that you feel no longer serves a purpose. That's when it becomes chronic pain. There's a difference between chronic and acute. Acute is your body saying, hey, pay attention, something's wrong. But chronic pain does not have to be felt. So my advice is find a good hypnotist, because you can lower the volume on that pain. And then sometimes the pain does serve a purpose. It gets you attention. It gets you sympathy. Perhaps it gets you a disability check. Perhaps you don't think you can't go back to your old job. You were injured and your job was your life, and you have all this emotion caught up in that pain. Well, if I'm not that, who am I? If I can't do that job anymore, I don't know who I am. And so it's the belief that we have to get to, that we have to change. And in hypnosis, you can get to that belief very easily and very quickly. I mean, compared to traditional methods of doing that. And so, yeah, find a good hypnotist, because if you really want it, it will happen. That's all I can say. If you get a well-trained hypnotist, and please, to everybody out there, ask about the courses, ask about how many hours they've studied, who they've studied with, and do some research. Or call me. You can go to the National Guild of Hypnotists, and they have a directory. You punch in your name and your area, your zip code, and they'll come up with all the hypnotists that are certified through the guild near you. So there's ways to find people that have more than a 2-day online training.
Oh my gosh.
Ask people, oh, they're out there. I run into them. So that's unfortunate. I mean, you can learn how to hypnotize anybody. Just go to YouTube. I mean, that's not hard to put somebody into a trance. What's hard is knowing what to do when you've got them there, how to help them in the best way. And that's where training comes into play. Even therapists, I mean, they're in psychology, psychiatrists and therapists don't get any training in hypnosis. And a lot of them will go to an 8-hour class or a weekend course. Quite honestly, you need more than that. I really feel you need more than that. Their therapy background will really help them, but there's a lot of nuances in hypnosis and a lot of different tools that if they use them, they could be so much more beneficial to their clients. And so, I train therapists to be hypnotists too, and to have that tool in their toolkit.
So if someone wanted to come and study with you, do you ever get people who want to become certified with you just so that they can better do it to themselves?
No, I don't do, well, I can. I mean, that's what I did. I just went to learn how to do hypnosis so I could go take a class. I had no intention of doing it as a career, and here I am. So there are people that will do that. I took a weekend course over a series of like 8 months. That is not the way to learn hypnosis in my view. It's if you want to do this as a profession or to use it in your career. I like to train people that are really serious about doing it and doing something value with it. It doesn't mean that everybody that takes my class has to, but I offer very intensive study. For people who want to help themselves, I teach self-hypnosis. In July, I'll be starting to teach a self-hypnosis class for just somebody who wants to use it for self-improvement. And it'll be a period of about 7 or 8 weeks where they'll come in for an hour once a week and learn a really cool process that I know. So that is different. People can learn it for their own, or they can come and actually come to school and get certified to be able to use it to help other people.
Well, what's great is actually a lot of my listeners are not only health enthusiasts, but I've got a lot of holistic healthcare professionals that listen to the show. And so it's a fantastic add-on to other modalities
It
like,
is, yeah, massage, Reiki, any of those healing alternatives. If you can help your clients go into a deeper trance and then know how to do suggestion work with them, they will have a much better experience. I mean, when you're on a massage table, you're already in a light state of trance. If you can help your client go deeper, oh my gosh, that's just going to make you be amazing as a massage therapist. So yeah, people from the alternative professions do, when they really understand hypnosis, do seek it out. And you know what, Ashley, there's one more thing that occurs to me that we should probably talk about. I don't know how close we are on time, but that is, what is the difference between meditation or mindfulness and hypnosis?
you were reading my mind. I was thinking that as well.
Well, I'm not psychic, but so yeah, I don't do that. Some people tell me, "Oh yeah, hypnosis. I have that deja vu stuff a lot." I'm like, "No, that's the wrong profession." Um, so there is a big difference, and unfortunately, like a lot of things in our lives, as things get to be popular and trendy, the word loses the meaning. When I was growing up, meditation meant more of an altered state, an enlightened state where you were seeking to clear your mind, right? Like the Dalai Lama would do, and have this experiential, this spiritual thing. Now, meditation doesn't always mean that to some people. Mindfulness is just being aware, being present. You know, Eckhart Tolle and some others, you know, great people have been talking about being in the moment, being present. And that's where this idea of mindfulness is coming from. And they're both very, very important tools. And again, neuroscience is showing us that when we are purposeful in our thoughts, it will create much deeper results. Hypnosis is not about clearing your mind. People think, oh, well, I heard everything you said. I remember everything you said. I must not have been hypnotized. No, that's a good thing. I want that. The idea with hypnosis is to be so focused on one thing that everything else fades into the background. So a lot of people say, you know, after I do my self-hypnosis, I find that now I can meditate so much easier. Well, if your goal is to clear your mind, hypnosis can be that first step. We're very focused on one thing. So you put yourself in a trance state where you're only focused on one thought. It's much easier to clear one thought than a million thoughts in your head, right? That makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and also doing it in a more intentional way. For example, one of the techniques I use in self-hypnosis is dropping your finger. That's the post-hypnotic suggestion. You drop your finger, you instantly return to the deepest level of trance you've ever had, and then you go deeper. So with meditation, not so much, unless you do it a lot. You know, people who meditate a lot, they put themselves into deep trance states, no doubt. So the intention then becomes different. I'm using self-hypnosis to have myself focus better, to be better at my job, to get rid of a fear, to find out what is that emotion that I'm feeling, to take myself out of pain. It's very intentional, where meditation isn't always that way. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm thinking about, as you were talking, I was thinking about how so many of us have, and I don't like to use the term ADHD because I don't really believe in that, but I believe that we have like shiny object syndrome. And you know, we've got our cell phones now. I mean, we're so distracted, we're so busy, and I just, the amount of car accidents and deaths that occur from people texting while driving or checking their email while driving, it's because we've given into this constant distraction. And what you're talking about is bringing ourselves back into focus or hyper focus. And I'm wondering, how effective is this technique at helping both parents and children um, no longer have focus issues?
Oh my gosh, it's so helpful. So I work with students a lot on, improving their studying and their test taking ability. Because think about this. In the first podcast, I talked about how everything goes into your subconscious mind. Whether you consciously registered or not, it still goes there. So I tell students, if you're sitting daydreaming, which by the way is alpha trance, in class, the information's still going in. You're not consciously registering it unless the teacher calls your name suddenly or the bell rings, right? It pops you back into your conscious mind. But the information is going in there and you can recall it. It's all in there. It's about being able to recall it. So I teach them specific techniques, putting themselves into trance before they go in that classroom to take that test, where that information is easily accessible. And with a little bit of practice, it is amazing how quickly that can come out. So when you take all of those skills, the actual studying, along with what you've heard in class and using trance, and then I install a lot of anchors with them. That's the NLP piece. That when they pick up that pencil or that pen, or they type on that keyboard, depending on how they're taking the exam, every time their fingers come together and touch that pencil, immediately their focus is there and they can easily and effortlessly recall the data. And it's just such a simple but powerful technique. So yeah, the ability to calm yourself, going back to those breaths that I challenge people with, for those children that come in, and I'm with you. I think ADHD or ADD, depending on which doctor you have, is the disease du jour for a lot of kids. Most of that, not all of it. I had a school, so I can tell you, in 11 years that I ran that school, the three children that truly had ADHD that benefited from the medication, the rest of it was behavioral. It was parenting. It was the child just having behavioral issues. And so, hypnosis can help with that too, because remember, with children, there is secondary gain. If they don't get the attention they need, they'll take whatever they can get. And if they're acting out or doing something wrong, guess what? They're getting attention. They don't care what kind it is. They don't care what kind it is. They just want the attention. So when I see children, I do not see any minor without also having sessions with a parent.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because things have to change at home.
Mm-hmm.
Things have to change at home. So if I have a smoker that comes in and let's say it's a woman and their husband is smoking and he doesn't understand why she wants to quit, I have to take some other precautions with her in hypnosis to tune out what he's going to say, because he's going to try to sabotage her. He can undo what I do very easily if she's not prepared and doesn't have tools for letting his comments run off of her, like being that Teflon.
Oh, this is fascinating. I mean, because I can think of so many times in my life, and I know other of my friends and acquaintances who have set out to change something about themselves, and then it was the noise going on from family members or their partner or their friends that really put them back. It's like the crab in the bucket, where if you put one crab in a bucket, the crab can crawl out. You put two crabs in a bucket, and the second a crab tries to crawl out, the other one will pull them back down. And I'm sure our friends and family don't really mean to, but I mean, I was back when, ages ago in my 20s, I had a relationship where I was starting a business. I was really growing as a person, and my boyfriend was so threatened that he tried to distract me, and he would come in when I was making sales calls and he would interrupt me. And he shared with me later that he felt so threatened that he thought that I'd grow so much that I would leave him. And so he was doing all these like sabotaging things, and it was amazing how much that happens in a relationship. So there's self-sabotage. And then there's, that external sabotage. So with hypnosis, you can help someone tune out, not tune out their love or their connection or that person, but just tune out and not accept certain suggestions.
Correct. So, for example, when I when I had my surgery, one of the suggestions that I gave myself repeatedly beforehand was that any comments from anyone, especially if they were in positions of authority that were contrary to my well-being and my healing, I would just hear as if they were speaking Greek. I would hear the words, but they would have no meaning to me. And sure enough, what happens? I get to the hospital, the nurse is coming in to do the IV, and she's looking at my chart and she says, "Oh, bilateral knee replacement. Boy, you're brave." Now, what did that tell me? That told me that she thought I was an idiot for doing two knees at one time, right? My own surgeon, God bless him, I love the guy, he was a great surgeon, but he actually said to me, "Roberta, I think you're making the right decision about doing them both at once for you. You might cuss my name for 6 months every time you hear it, but you'll be glad you did it." Well, what does that tell me? I'm going to have pain for 6 months. So we say things sometimes not intentionally meaning harm. And if we know that potential exists, if we know that, so if I know I'm sending someone back to an environment where they're still smoking, I'm going to give them lots of ideas about how to handle that and prepare for that, so that they aren't sucked back in. They're like that crab. They're not pulled back down into the bucket, because that can happen. We can also do that to ourselves if we're not careful. And so again, a good hypnotist is going to make sure, obviously we can't plan for every alternative that happens out there, but there's some real common stuff. And if we're working on the emotional aspect of things, more often than not, that's where the real problem lays. It's not the eating or the smoking or the drinking or the sexting or the gambling or the shopping, those compulsive type behaviors. Those are just symptoms. We call them behaviors. People do them too much, so they distract from the real problem. What we have to get to, it's like, I'm a detective. I want to get to the bottom of the case. And I'll know when we get there, the client's going to know when we get there, and we're going to figure it out. And we're not going to just chop the head off the weed with a lawnmower. We're going to get out there in the yard and we're going to pull that weed out by the roots. Because if we keep chopping it off on the top, guess what happens? All that energy just goes to the roots and they get deeper and stronger. We might feel better. That lawn might look real pretty for a while, but those roots, we don't see them. They're growing like crazy underground, and they're getting stronger. And so, I believe really good hypnosis does a combination of a lot of things, but getting to the root of the problem is really important.
A lot of hypnosis has been around for a really long time, and so I encourage everyone to go wiki. In fact, I'll put the link in the show notes, but just go see the history of hypnosis. It's rich. It's been around for a long time, but only now recently have we begun to understand the science behind it. And you have a book you wanted to recommend that the listeners read. You're recommending The Brain's Way of Healing by Norman
Deutsch.
Deutsch.
Yeah, Dr. Deutsch. I have like 5 or 6 of my favorites, and I was like, okay, which one did I tell her? The Brain's Way of Healing. He's written a couple. I like them because they're good they're good reading for average people. They're not too technical. They give you lots of different things, and they're not on hypnosis, quite honestly. In fact, I don't think, maybe in one of the books he actually mentions hypnosis. But the reason why I like people to read those kinds of books is it talks about neuroscience and neuroplasticity and how our brains can heal themselves. And when we understand that concept and we see different examples of that, then we can have the attitude, well, if they can do it with that, why can't I do it with this? And it's about the fact that we have been led to believe for hundreds of years that our brain is hardwired, and we know that is not true anymore. Our brain is plastic, it's malleable. Now, the longer it's been a certain way, well, it could take a little bit longer to change, but we can change. We just have to want it. And so when we started getting all this wonderful imaging equipment like fMRIs and PET scans, that's when the neuroscientists really were able to take a good hard look at the brain and actually see what's going on. There's been a lot of experimentation from way back in the 70s, but now we have lots of other tools that show us that hypnosis, the trance state itself, is a chemical reaction that happens in the brain. We know where it happens. We know why it happens. We even know some of the things that stimulate trance. And we've learned so much from that field of neuroscience that it's helped us refine techniques in hypnosis that we can make them better and better and better for our clients.
I love it. And I have to just also recommend a book. It's a bit brainier. So if you want a heavy read, it's The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. Absolutely blew my mind. And it was written back in 1992, but it's still relevant. So I highly recommend that book as well. Have you read that one?
I have not. One of the early books that got me into it was called The Biology of Belief by Dr. James Lipton. And he was a biologist, actually, that started studying how our cells work. We thought at one time the nucleus was the powerhouse, and he said, oh no, it's not. It's the cell membrane, the membrane of the proteins. And sure enough, I mean, he was pretty much ostracized by a lot of his peers at the time, but so was Galileo and, a lot of different people like that, right? But really, we know now that proteins affect cells, and there's so many things that we know now about neurons and how they function. And honestly, for every one thing we find out, it raises 25 more questions about our brain. Very complex. But what I know for certain is that every single time a client walks in the door, their subconscious mind takes them exactly where they need to go, and they know how to fix it. And so if we had to keep it at its simplest level, if you really want the change, just trust the process and it will happen.
That is just beautifully said, and I think you've expressed why everyone should go see a hypnotist, because we all want to achieve optimal health, and if we can learn life skills that'll take us to the next level, that'll help us put that Teflon shield to not take in the negative comments, especially if someone watches cable TV. I don't have cable TV. I got rid of that years ago, but from what I hear from a lot of people is that like every second commercial is this really intense drug commercial, and just all the sort of negative suggestions that are going on when the TV's on or the radio's on. And so if people can just learn to put that Teflon shield on and not take in the negative from their maybe from their friends or family, from the media, and they can really, really focus their intentions on their optimal health. I just think that's so, so powerful. So thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing this. If you're interested in learning more from Roberta and from coming and seeing her live, or, maybe convincing her to get on Skype with you, go to fairhypnosis.com. That's FAREHYPNOSIS.com. And also check out the show notes for this episode. We'll have links to those books that we were discussing. Fantastic. It was so much fun doing this with you. And I'm really excited for where you're going. It just sounds like you're really growing in this industry.
Well, that's my goal, Ashley, is just to take the field of hypnotism to a different level. There's just so many positive things. And what I love about it is the worst that can happen is that it doesn't work. Really, I mean, that is the worst that can happen. And, I hope that never happens for everybody, but, I can't guarantee anything. If people aren't, I do send people away because I know they're not ready, and I don't want them to waste their money.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's truly changed my life, I have to say. It's why I gave up my career. I had a very good career. I gave it up because I have to do this for other people. And
Yeah. Well, it's like the worst thing that can happen if you go get surgery is death, or dismemberment. It's like the worst thing can happen if you go to a hypnotist is not, it doesn't work and you're out, a
for a few
little bit of
months.
money. Yeah, it's just like compare it to like how much it costs to go get a surgery. I mean, it's just a crazy or get hopped up on pain meds and then you need a liver transplant 10 years down the road, or you need to go to NA for the rest of your life. Like, just go see a hypnotist for a few $100s. Thank you so much, Roberta, for coming on the show. Had a great time learning from you.
Thanks, Ashley. Have a wonderful day.
How would you like to learn from top naturopathic physicians? Go to freedoctorcourse.com and sign up for the free course that'll email you videos with tips and tricks to achieving optimal health. That's freedoctorcourse.com. freedoctorcourse.com.